Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamti Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtaki. So continuing with the discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 29, talks between Narad and King Prachin Barhi. Text number 15 onwards. Vaishasam narakam payur lubdhako andho tume shnu hastapadopamanstabhyam yukto yati karoti cha. When it is said that Puranjan goes to Vaishas, it is meant that he goes to hell. He is accompanied by Lubdak, which is a working sense in the rectum. Formerly, I have also spoken of two blind associates. These associates should be understood to be hands and legs. Being helped by the hands and legs, the living entity performs all kinds of works and moves hither and thither. So this is Narad Muni speaking to King Prachin Bari, because he said, I did not really understand the allegory that you spoke of. So Narad Muni is explaining it. Antapuram cha hridayam vishuchirman uchyate tatra moham prasadam va harsham prapnoti tad gune. The word Antapura refers to the heart. The word Vishuchin, meaning going everywhere, indicates the mind. Within the mind, the living entity enjoys the effects of the modes of material nature. These effects sometimes cause illusion, sometimes satisfaction, and sometimes jubilation. The mind and intelligence of the living entity in material existence are affected by the modes of material nature. And according to the association of the material modes, the mind is habituated to go here and there. The heart feels satisfaction, jubilation, or illusion according to the effects of the modes of material nature. Actually, the living entity in its material condition remains inert. It is the modes of nature that act on the mind and heart. The results are enjoyed or suffered by the living entity. So this is clearly stated in Bhagavad Gita. The bewildered spirit soul under the influence of the three modes of material nature thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by nature. So the mind and intelligence are affected by the modes of material nature. And accordingly, we are sometimes in illusion, sometimes satisfied, sometimes happy. So this keeps on going because of three modes affect the mind and intelligence in this way. Yatha yatha vikriyate gunakto vikaroti va tatha tatho drishtatma tad vrittir anukaryate. Formerly, it was explained that the queen is one's intelligence. While one is awake or asleep, that intelligence creates different situations. Being influenced by contaminated intelligence, the living entity envisions something and simply imitates the actions and reactions of his intelligence. So being influenced by contaminated intelligence, the living entity envisions something. The queen of Puranjan is described here as intelligence itself. Intelligence acts both in the dream state and in the waking state, but it is contaminated by the three modes of material nature. Since the intelligence is contaminated, the living entity is also contaminated. So the living entity is not contaminated, it's the consciousness of the living entity that gets contaminated, means that gets impure, covered by the impure intelligence. In the conditioned state, the living entity acts according to his contaminated intelligence. Although he simply remains an observer, he nonetheless acts, being forced by a contaminated intelligence, which in reality is a passive agent. It's a passive agent, intelligence, because Without the soul, intelligence cannot work. But it becomes so powerful when the soul um, identifies himself with the body and his intelligence gets covered over, the real intelligence gets covered over, and consciousness gets covered over, then, then in the material world, then we act as if we are in a dream. It's an illusion. Deho rathistvindrayashvaha samvatsara yo agatihi dvikarma chakras strigun dhvaja pancha subandhuraha manorashmir buddhisuto hrinnido dvandva kubaraha panchendriyartha prakshepaha saptadhatu varutakaha आहुतिर्विक्रमो वायो मृगतृष्णां प्रधावति एकादशेन्द्रिय चमो पंचसूना vinodkrit. Narad Muni continued, what I referred to as a chariot was in actuality the body. The senses are the horses that pull the chariot. As time passes, year after year, these horses run without obstruction. But in fact, they make no progress. Pious and impious activities are the two wheels of the chariot. The three modes of material nature are the chariot's flags. The five types of life here constitute the living entity's bondage, and the mind is considered to be the rope. Intelligence is the chariot driver. The heart is the sitting place in the chariot, and the dualities of life, such as pleasure and pain, are the knotting place. The seven elements are the coverings of the chariot, and the working senses are five external processes. The 11 senses are the soldiers, being engrossed in sense enjoyment. The living entity seated on the chariot hankers after fulfillment of his false desires and runs after sense enjoyment, life after life. So this is a life. This is the life cycle of a soul in a body. Here, Narad Muni says, these horses run without obstruction, but in fact, they make no progress. No progress means what? I mean, we are running, the whole world is running after so many things, creating so many things, accumulating so many things. But what happens is, it basically runs between life, birth, old age, disease, death. Birth, old age, disease, death. Birth, old age, disease, death. That's all the whole chariot is running. The horses are running, chariot, and the wheels are there, and the wheels are made of pious and impious activities. The three modes of nature are the chariot's flags, and just running. Just like in a circus, when we go and that ride is there in a circle. It just goes up and down, up and down, up and down, and the kids are going up and down and they're enjoying. But in the end, they didn't go anywhere. They're just there. So those without any purpose of life, this is what happens with them. The entanglement of the living entity in sense enjoyment is very nicely explained in these verses. The word samvatsar, meaning the progress of time, is significant. Day after day, week after week, fortnight after fortnight, month after month, year after year, the living entity becomes entangled in the chariot's progress. The chariot rests on two wheels, which are pious and impious activities. The living entity attains a certain position in life in a particular type of body according to his pious and impious activities. But his transmigration into different bodies should not be taken as a progress. Real progress is explained in Bhagavad Gita. Tyaktva deham punarjanma naipi. One makes real progress when he does not have to take on another material body. As stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Eita Brahmanda Bhari Ananta Jiva Gana Chaurasi Laksha Yonite Karaya Brahman. The living entities wandering throughout the entire universe and taking birth in different species on different planets. Thus, he moves up and down, but that is not real progress. Real progress is getting out of this material world altogether. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, from the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery, wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains to my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. Even if one is promoted to Brahmaloka, the highest planet in the universe, he has to come down again to the lower planetary systems. Thus, he is wandering up and down perpetually under the influence of the three modes of material nature. So this is what we are going through, up and down, even from Brahmaloka, up down to the lowest planetary system. From the level of Brahmaji to the insignificant insect. In Bhagavatam, the smallest insect called Indragopa. Or from biological or scientific terms, we can think one of the microbes could be the smallest insect, maybe virus or bacteria, whatever it is. The living entity is just going through this Chaurasi Lakh yonis, and this cycle goes on. Thus he's wandering up and down perpetually under the influence of the three modes of material nature. Being illusioned, he thinks he is making progress. He is like an airplane encircling the earth day and night, incapable of leaving the earth's gravitational field. Factually, there is no progress because the airplane is conditioned by the earth's gravity. Just as a king is seated on a chariot, the living entity is seated in the body. The sitting place is the heart, and the living entity sits there and engages in the struggle for existence, which goes on without progress perpetually. In the words of Narottam Das Thakur, Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda, Kevala Vishera Bhanda. The living entity struggles very hard due to the influence of fruitive activity and mental speculation, and simply gets a different type of body life after life. He eats all kinds of nonsense and is condemned by his activities of sense enjoyment. If one really wants to progress in life, he must give up the ways of karma kanda and jnana kanda, fruitive activities and mental speculation. Being fixed in Krishna consciousness, one can become free from the entanglement of birth and death and the vain struggle for existence. In these verses, the word Mriga Trishnam Pradhavati are very significant because the living entity is influenced by a thirst for sense enjoyment. He is like a deer that goes to the desert to search out water. In a desert, an animal simply searches in vain for water. Of course, there is no water in the desert, and the animal simply sacrifices his life in an attempt to find it. Everyone is planning for future happiness, thinking that somehow or other, if he can reach a certain point, he will be happy. In actuality, however, when he comes to that point, he sees that there is no happiness. He then plans to go further and further to another point. This is called Mrig Trishna, and its basis is sense enjoyment in this material world. So this is a chariot that we all are riding. And the aim is to find happiness. And Narad Muni has explained this is like Mrig Trishna, Mrig Trishnam Pradhavati. Dhavati is running. Pradhavati means Prakrishta Rupena Dhavati, means running really with force or with good intention. and looking forward, searching for water in the desert. Means searching for happiness in the material world, which is Dukkhalayam. Krishna had designed it as Dukkhalayam. It's a place of misery. Cannot find happiness here. And when the deer runs in the desert to look for water, he sees somewhere an oasis, and he runs toward it, and he sees there is no water; it's just an oasis. And then he sees somewhere else it's an oasis. He runs towards it, and ultimately it dies. There is no water. In the material world that we are running, material happiness that we are running after. Now, Krishna, what he has done, or his Maya, they have given a drop or two of happiness here and there. We are looking for that ocean of happiness. And the drop or two here and there, that cannot satisfy us, obviously not, but they keep us entangled in the material world. Oh, one drop is here. I can definitely find more water here. So he keeps on looking for more and more of happiness. But no, it's not there. This is what Maya is. See, if it was only misery, only pain, then obviously he wouldn't live here. Now somebody can ask, then why Krishna keeps little happiness here? Well, first of all, material world is also his creation, and his creation cannot be incomplete. It has to be complete in whatever way. And secondly, he doesn't want people to approach him out of frustration. He wants people to approach him out of love. He frustrates, but those who have intelligence to understand what this material world is and what Krishna is and what's our relationship with them, they really start developing love for him. That's the real way of getting back home, back to God, to develop love for him. Of course, Krishna says everybody is pious who approaches him in any way. Piety doesn't take us back to the spiritual world. It just makes us take up the path. That's all. But it's a devotion service. It's a love for Krishna. The real desire, the real greed to attain him. That's what makes us go back home, back to God. Samvatsaras Chandavega Kalo Yenopalakshita Tasyahani Gandharva Gandharvyo Ratraya Smritaha Arantyayo Parikrantya Shashti Uttarashat Trayam. What was previously explained as Chandavega, powerful time, is covered by days and nights named Gandharvas and Gandharvis. The body's lifespan is gradually reduced by the passage of days and nights, which number 360. The word Parikrantya means by traveling. The living entity travels on his chariot day and night during a year consisting of 360 or more days and nights. Life's progress is taken for the unnecessary labor required to cover these 360 days and nights of life. So life's progress is taken for the unnecessary labor. And we think that we have covered or we have attained a whole lot by having some deadlines and the progress reports and the reviews or this or that, what I achieved in last year. I mean, this is a time of the year when everybody's progress is being analyzed. That's not really progress. That only it means is we are entangling ourselves more and more. That's all. Kalkanya Jara Saksha Lokastam Navinandati Swasaram Jagrihe Mrityu Kshaye Yavaneshwaraha. What was described as Kalkanya should be understood as old age. No one wants to accept old age, but Yavaneshwara, Yavanraj, whose death accepts Jara, old age, as his sister. Encased within the body, the living entity, living being accepts Kalkanya, old age, just before death. Yavaneshwar is the emblem of death, Yamaraj. Before going to the place of Yamaraj, the living entity accepts Jara, old age, the sister of Yamaraj. One is subjected to the influence of Yavanraj and his sister due to impious activity. Those who are in Krishna consciousness and are engaged in devotion service under the instructions of Narad Muni are not subjected to the influence of Yamaraj and his sister, Jara. If one is Krishna conscious, he conquers death. After leaving the material body, he does not accept another body that is material, but returns home back to Godhead. This is verified by Bhagavad Gita. So, encased within the body, the living being accepts Kalkanya, old age, just before death. So we don't, this body does not actually belongs to us. We don't belong in this material body, but we are somehow encased. We are in this cage of the body. We are stuck. And before we leave this body, the body gets old. The living entity doesn't get old, but the body gets old. So this is the law of nature. Everybody goes through these steps. And nobody wants these steps. And this is what Prabhupada says, if one is Krishna conscious, he conquers death. Conquers death doesn't mean he's not going to die in this lifetime. We all are going to leave our body. But the point is, after leaving this body, we don't accept another body. We don't take another body. And this body, living in this body and leaving this body is very, very painful. Adhyo vyadhyastasya sanika yavanashchara bhutopasargashurya prajvaro dvivido jvaraha evam bahu vidhair dukhair deva bhutatma sambhava klisham mana shatam varsham dehe dehi tamo vritaha pranendriya manodharma atmanyadhyasya niruna Shete kam lavan dhyayan mamaham iti karma krit. The followers of Yavaneshwara, Yamaraj, are called the soldiers of death, and they are known as the various types of disturbances that pertain to the body and mind. Prajvar represents the two types of fever, extreme heat and extreme cold, means typhoid and pneumonia. The living entity lying down within the body is disturbed by so many tribulations pertaining to providence, to other living entities, and to his own body and mind. Despite all kinds of tribulations, the living entity, subjected to the necessities of the body, mind, and senses, and suffering from various types of disease, is carried away by many plans due to his lust to enjoy the world. Although transcendental to this material existence, the living entity, out of ignorance, accepts all these material miseries under the pretext of false egoism, I and mine. In this way, he lives for 100 years within this body. So, despite all kinds of tribulations, so bodily tribulations, and then the miseries given, adibhutik, adidevik, adhyatmik, klesha, and so many problems subjected to the necessities of the body, mind, and senses, suffering from various types of diseases, the living entity is carried away by many plans due to what? Due to his lust to enjoy the world. So this is our lifestyle. This is our life. Even right now, coronavirus, pandemic is there, but still people are running around, and I guess everywhere people are acting like it's not there. Corona is not there. We have already conquered it. The mask is just for show these days, just like a fashion symbol, the mask has become. Nobody's even bothered about Corona anymore. Why? Because of a lust to enjoy the world. It's so deep rooted. And if people start to die in bulk, then again people will run back home, and after a while they'll forget. Oh no, there is no corona. It will not hurt us. It will not affect us. See, I survived for such a long time. Now I'm immune to corona. It's not going to happen that easily. In the Vedas, it is stated, Asango ayam purusha. The living entity is actually separate from material existence, for the soul is not material. In Bhagavad Gita, it is also said that the living entity is a superior energy, and the material elements, earth, water, fire, air, and so on, are the inferior energy. The material elements are also described as bhinna or separate energy. When the internal or superior energy comes in contact with the external energy, it is subjected to so many tribulations. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord also says, Matra Sparshastu Konteya. Because of the material body, the living entity is subjected to so many tribulations brought about by air, water, fire, extreme heat, extreme cold, sunshine, excessive eating, unhealthy food, maladjustments of the three elements of the body, kapha, pitta, and vayu, and so on. The intestines, the throat, the brain, and the other parts of the body are affected by all kinds of diseases that are so powerful that they become sources of extreme suffering for the living entity. The living entity, however, is different from all these material elements. The two types of fever described in this verse can be explained in contemporary language as pneumonia and typhoid. When there is an excessive fever in the body, this is typhoid and pneumonia. And there is typhoid and pneumonia, and they're described as prajavar. There are also other miseries created by other living entities. The state exacts taxes, and there are so many thieves, rogues, and cheaters. Miseries brought about by other living entities are called adhibhautik. There are also miseries in the form of famine, pestilence, scarcity, war, earthquakes, and so on. These are caused by the demigods or other sources beyond our control. Actually, there are many enemies of the living entities, and these are all described to point out how miserable this material existence is. So, Prabhupada just described in little detail, he didn't go in too much detail about describing the mysteries of the material existence. There's so many, actually, unlimited. And even in these miseries, people are trying to be happy, which is because it's our constitutional position to be happy. We're trying to find happiness at the wrong place. And those people who are struggling or who are fighting, and they attain some position or lots of money or something, then others just glorify them. Oh, see, he's a fighter and he's our hero. He has just fought against all the odds, and he has achieved this and that. And the person who has achieved, he also thinks he's a hero, and he becomes very happy. It's all nonsense. In the end, what? Whether we became such an hero, or whether we remain materially as zero, we all are going to die, leave our body, and take birth again in some other species, some other family, some other planet, and then continue on. Who will remember? that this soul was a hero in the previous life. Who will care? Who cares? But this is what is going on. And so-called hero or whatever the successful, so-called successful man, in the end, what? Even if he becomes very successful, all he is going to do is four activities: eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. That's all. Maybe in a very luxurious way, but this is all he's going to do. So, what's a big deal? But how many people are ready to understand this? Knowing the basic misery of material existence, one should be induced to get out of the material clutches and return home back to Godhead. Actually, the living entity is not at all happy in this material body. Because of the body, he suffers thirst and hunger and is influenced by the mind, by words, by anger, by the belly, by the genitals, by the rectum, and so on. Manifold miseries encircle the transcendental living entity simply because he desires to satisfy his senses in this material world. If he simply withdraws from activities of sense gratification and applies his senses in the service of the Lord, all the problems of material existence will immediately diminish. And with the advancement of Krishna consciousness, he will be freed from all tribulation. And after giving up the body, will return back home, back to Godhead. So, Prabhupada, if he simply withdraws from the activities of sense gratification and applies his senses in the service of the Lord. So, if we cannot completely withdraw, we slowly start withdrawing and engaging more and more and more in the service of the Lord, more chanting, more hearing, reading, more service, more association. That's all. Then slowly, gradually we make advancement. And this is how Prabhupada, he will be freed from all tribulation. And after giving up the body, goes back to Godhead. And this is the process. Yadatmanam avigyaya bhagvantam param gurum purushastu vishajjeta guneshu prakrite swadrik gunabhimani satada karmani kurute avashah shuklam krishnam dohitam va yatha karma vijayate. The living entity by nature has minute independence to choose his own good or bad fortune. But when he forgets his supreme master, the personality of Godhead, he gives himself up unto the modes of material nature. Being influenced by the modes of material nature, he identifies himself with the body and for the interest of the body becomes attached to various activities. Sometimes he is under the mode of ignorance, sometimes mode of passion, and sometimes the mode of goodness. The living entity thus gets different types of bodies under the modes of material nature. These different types of bodies are explained in Bhagavad Gita. The living entity in the material nature follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus he meets with good and evil among various species. Because of associating with the modes of nature, the living entity gets a variety of body from the 8,400,000 forms. It is clearly explained here that the living entity has a little independence, indicated by the word swadrik, meaning one who can see his own welfare. The living entity's constitutional position is very minute and he can be misled in his choice. He may choose to imitate the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A servant may desire to start his own business and imitate his master. And when he chooses to do so, he may leave the protection of his master. Sometimes he is a failure and sometimes he is successful. Similarly, the living entity, part and parcel of Krishna, starts his own business to compete with the Lord. There are many competitors out to attain the Lord's position, but to become like the Lord is not at all possible. Thus, there is a great struggle for existence with the material world as different parties try to imitate the Lord. Material bondage is caused by deviation from the service of the Lord and attempts to imitate him. The Lord is imitated by Mayavadi philosophers who try to become one with the Lord in an artificial way. When the Mayavadi philosophers think of themselves as liberated, they are under the delusion of mental concoction. No one can become one with or equal to the Lord. To imagine this is to continue one's bondage in material existence. So nicely again explained by Prabhupada that when a servant wants to become the master, wants to imitate the master, and he wants to start a business just like the master. So he may become successful or he may become failure. So failure means then he says, forget it. I don't want to be separate from the master. So success is, okay, he starts his own business. Means then he wants to become the Lord, become the master, become the owner or proprietor of the business. But even that is not possible. We cannot compete with Krishna. So instead of becoming a master of the business, we actually become a servant of the senses, servant of Maya. We come under the control of Maya. And then in the process, again, take birth again and die again. Take birth again and die again. This is what is going on. To imagine this, and this is a process, no one can become one with or equal to God. To imagine this is to continue one's bondage in material existence. And this is what we have been trying to do since time immemorial, unsuccessfully. Okay, so I guess we can stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Please accept my humble obeisance. Thank you
Hare
so much,
Krishna.
Prabhuji. After hearing Adit Prabhuji's I was remembering his association, and I just realized that it is so important that can come at any time. Like it is so important to make progress each and every moment in Krishna consciousness. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Like
I
the
know.
value of association. It's really sad, and
Yeah.
that continuous making progress, and like we should not wait like tomorrow we can do this or later we can do this, because we never know this. So thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Thank you. You also live in the same area, right? Gold City.
Yes, yes, Prabhuji. Like near, I don't know exactly where he lives. I have met only 1-2 times, but yes, nearby only he lives to my place. I will like contact Radha Prabhuji or Dipanshu Prabhuji.
Okay, sure.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mata. Hare Krishna.
मुझे आज मन नहीं लग रहा था क्लास में.
I know.
Prabhuji,
Same here.
Prabhuji,
Same here.
same feeling, Prabhuji.
I know. I cannot concentrate.
मतलब अंदर से वो बहुत गंदी वाली फीलिंग आ रही है प्रभु जी की बताया नहीं जा रहा है प्रभु जी.
Yeah. Chalo, let's chant at least one round extra for him.
Yes, Prabhuji, sure.
Yeah.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. Chalo, let's start. You all have a wonderful and safe day. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri
Hare
Ram.
Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada.